The history of Taiwan dates back tens of thousands of years to the earliest known evidence of human habitation. The sudden appearance of an agrarian culture around 3000 BC is believed to reflect the arrival of the ancestors of today's Taiwanese Aborigines. The island was colonized by the Dutch in the 17th century, followed by an influx of Han Chinese, including Hakka immigrants from areas of Fujian and Guangdong of mainland China, across the Taiwan Strait. The Spanish also built a settlement in the north for a brief period, but were driven out by the Dutch in 1642. In 1662, Koxinga, a loyalist of the Ming dynasty, who had lost control of mainland China in 1644, defeated the Dutch and established a base of operations on the island. His forces were defeated by the Qing dynasty in 1683, and parts of Taiwan became increasingly integrated into the Qing Empire. Following the First Sino-Japanese War in 1895, the Qing ceded the island, along with Penghu, to the Empire of Japan. Taiwan produced rice and sugar to be exported to the Empire of Japan, and also served as a base for the Japanese colonial expansion into Southeast Asia and the Pacific during World War II. Japanese imperial education was implemented in Taiwan, and many Taiwanese also fought for Japan during the war. In 1945, following the end of World War II, the Republic of China, led by the Kuomintang, took control of Taiwan. In 1949, after losing control of mainland China in the Chinese Civil War, the ROC government under the KMT withdrew to Taiwan and Chiang Kai-shek declared martial law. The KMT ruled Taiwan as a single-party state for 40 years, until democratic reforms in the 1980s, which led to the first-ever direct presidential election in 1996. During the post-war period, Taiwan experienced rapid industrialization and economic growth, and was known as one of the four Asian tigers. Prehistoric settlement. In the late Pleistocene, sea levels were about 140 meters lower than in the present day, exposing the floor of the shallow Taiwan Strait as a land bridge that was crossed by mainland fauna. The oldest evidence of human presence on Taiwan consists of 3 cranial fragments and a molar tooth found at Chukan in Duozhen District, Tainan. These are estimated to be between 20,000 and 30,000 years old. The oldest artifacts are chipped pebble tools of a Paleolithic culture found in 4 caves in Changbin, Taitung, dated 15,000 to 5,000 years ago, and similar to contemporary sites in Fujian. The same culture is found at sites of Taluanbi on the southern tip of Taiwan, persisting until 5,000 years ago. At the beginning of the Holocene 10,000 years ago, sea levels rose, forming the Taiwan Strait and cutting off the island from the Asian mainland. Around 3000 BC, the Neolithic Dapenken culture abruptly appeared and quickly spread around the coast of the island. Their sites are characterized by corded ware pottery, polished stone adzes and slate points. The inhabitants cultivated rice and millet, but were also heavily reliant on marine shells and fish. Most scholars believe this culture is not derived from the Changbinyan, but was brought across the strait by the ancestors of today's Taiwanese Aborigines, speaking early Austronesian languages. Some of these people later migrated from Taiwan to the islands of Southeast Asia and thence throughout the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Malayo-Polynesian languages are now spoken across a huge area from Madagascar to Hawaii, Easter Island and New Zealand, but form only one branch of the Austronesian family, the rest of whose branches are found only on Taiwan. The Dapenken culture was succeeded by a variety of cultures throughout the island, including the Tahu and Yingpu cultures. Iron appeared at the beginning of the current era in such cultures as the Niao Sung culture. The earliest metal artifacts were trade goods, but by around 400 AD wrought iron was being produced locally using bloomeries, a technology possibly introduced from the Philippines. Early Chinese histories refer to visits to eastern islands that some historians identify with Taiwan. Troops of the Three Kingdoms state of Wu were recorded as visiting an island known as Yaizhou in the 3rd century. The Book of Sui relates that Emperor Yang of the Sui dynasty sent 3 expeditions to a place called Luqiu early in the 7th century. Later the name Luqiu referred to the island chain to the northeast of Taiwan, but some scholars believe it may have referred to Taiwan in the Sui period. Okinawa Island was referred to by the Chinese as Great Ryukyu, and Taiwan as Lesser Ryukyu. Dutch and Spanish rule. Portuguese sailors, passing Taiwan in 1544, first jotted in a ship's log the name of the island Ilha Formosa, meaning beautiful island. In 1582 the survivors of a Portuguese shipwreck spent 10 weeks battling malaria and aborigines before returning to Macau on a raft. Dutch traders in search of an Asian base first arrived on the island in 1623 to use the island as a base for Dutch commerce with Japan and the coastal areas of China. The Dutch East India Company built Fort Zeelandia on the coastal islet of Taiwan. The Spanish established a settlement at Santissima, Trinidad, building Fort San Salvador on the northwest coast of Taiwan near Keelung in 1626, which they occupied until 1642 when they were driven out by a joint Dutch Aborigine invasion force. They also built a fort in Tamsui but had already abandoned it by 1638. The Dutch built a second administrative castle on the main island of Taiwan in 1633 and set out to earnestly turn Taiwan into a Dutch colony. The first order of business was to punish villages that had violently opposed the Dutch and unite the Aborigines in allegiance with the VOC. The first punitive expedition was against the villages of Bacloan and Matauf, north of Sakam near Taiwan. The Matauf campaign had been easier than expected, and the tribe submitted after having their village razed by fire. The campaign also served as a threat to other villages from Tirosan to Longjiao. The 1636 punitive attack on Lemay Island in response to the killing of the shipwrecked crews of the Beverwyck and the Golden Lion ended 10 years later with the entire Aboriginal population of 1,100 removed from the island, including 327 Lamayans killed in a cave, having been trapped there by the Dutch and suffocated in the fumes and smoke pumped into the cave by the Dutch and their allied Aborigines from Sakam, Solang and Pangsoya. The men were forced into slavery in Batavia and the women and children became servants and wives for the Dutch officers. The events on Lemay changed the course of Dutch rule to work closer with allied Aborigines, though there remained plans to depopulate the outlying islands. After ejecting the Spanish from Fort Santo Domingo in northern Taiwan in 1642, the Dutch erected Fort Antonio on the site, which still stands. They then sought to establish control of the western plains between the new possessions and their base at Taiyuan. After a brief but destructive campaign in 1645, Peter Boone was able to subdue the tribes in this area, including the Kingdom of Middag. The VOC administered the island and its predominantly Aboriginal population until 1662, setting up a tax system, schools to teach Romanized script of Aboriginal languages and evangelizing. Although its control was mainly limited to the western plain of the island, the Dutch systems were adopted by succeeding occupiers. The first influx of migrants from coastal Fujian came during the Dutch period, in which merchants and traders from the mainland Chinese coast sought to purchase hunting licenses from the Dutch or hide out in Aboriginal villages to escape the king authorities. Most of the immigrants were young single males who were discouraged from staying on the island, often referred to by Han as the Gate of Hell for its reputation in taking the lives of sailors and explorers. The Dutch originally sought to use their castle Zeelandia at Taiwan as a trading base between Japan and China, but soon realized the potential of the huge deer populations that roamed in herds of thousands along the alluvial plains of Taiwan's western regions. Deer were in high demand by the Japanese, who were willing to pay exorbitant prices for use of the hides in samurai armor. Other parts of the deer were sold to hand traders for meat and medical use. The Dutch paid aborigines for the deer brought to them and tried to manage the deer stocks to keep up with demand. The Dutch also employed hand to farm sugarcane and rice for export. Some of these rice and sugarcane products reached as far as the markets of Persia, Kingdom of Tungning. Manchu forces broke through Shanhai Pass in 1644 and rapidly overwhelmed the Ming dynasty. In 1661, a naval fleet led by the Ming loyalist Koxinga arrived in Taiwan to oust the Dutch from Zealandia and establish a pro-Ming base in Taiwan. Koxinga was born to Zheng Jilong, a Chinese merchant and pirate, and Tagawa Matsu, a Japanese woman, in 1624 in Hirado, Nagasaki Prefecture, Japan. He was raised there until 7 and moved to Quanzhou, in the Fujian province of China. In a family made wealthy from shipping and piracy, Koxinga inherited his father's trade networks, which stretched from Nagasaki to Macau. Following the Manchu advance on Fujian, Koxinga retreated from his stronghold in Amoy and besieged Taiwan in the hope of establishing a strategic base to marshal his troops to retake his base at Amoy. In 1662, following a 9-month siege, Koxinga captured the Dutch fortress Zealandia and Taiwan became his base. The Taiwanese aboriginal tribes who were previously allied with the Dutch against the Chinese during the Guowai Rebellion in 1652 turned against the Dutch during the siege of Fort Zealandia and defected to Koxinga's Chinese forces. The aboriginals of Sincan defected to Koxinga after he offered them amnesty. The Sincan aboriginals then proceeded to work for the Chinese and behead Dutch people in executions. The frontier aboriginals in the mountains and plains also surrendered and defected to the Chinese on May 17, 1661, celebrating their freedom from compulsory education under the Dutch rule by hunting down Dutch people and beheading them and trashing their Christian school textbooks. Koxinga died 4 months after the siege was over. There were speculations that he died in a sudden fit of madness when his officers refused to carry out his orders to execute his son Zheng Jing. Zheng Jing had an affair with his wet nurse and conceived a child with her. Other accounts are more straightforward, attributing Koxinga's death to a case of malaria. Following the death of Koxinga, his son Zheng Jing took over the Zheng regime, leading the remaining 7,000 Ming loyalist troops to Taiwan. In response to raids by Zheng Jing and in an effort to starve out the forces in Taiwan, the king decreed to relocate all of the southern coastal towns and ports that had been the targets of raids by the Zheng fleet and thus provided supplies for the resistance. This to a large extent backfired, and from 1662 to 46 major waves of immigration occurred from these areas to Taiwan due to the severe hardships incurred from this relocation policy. In a move to take advantage of this king misstep, Zheng Jing promoted immigration to Taiwan by promising free eastern land cultivation and ownership for peasants in exchange for compulsory military service by all males in case the island was in danger of a Qing invasion.